everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the DevLogue Podcast, where we dive deep into everything related to software development. Our focus is on learning and exploring how to improve our development processes, particularly through leveraging AI and data-driven strategies. I'm your host, Henry, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Anmol. How are you doing, Anmol?
Henry, I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here for yet another episode of the DevLogue Podcast.
Awesome. So today we have a special guest who's an industry expert with extensive experience in engineering leadership. He's also a user of the open source Apache DevLogue project that I'm maintaining. So our guest today is Chris Stump, VP of Engineering at Airspace. Chris has successfully transformed his team's software delivery capability by leveraging DORA metrics. And I'm excited to dive into his journey and insights. So Chris, it's great to have you here. Could you start by telling us a bit about yourself and what Airspace does? How does the unique nature of aerospace business influence the priorities and challenges of your engineering teams?
Thanks, Henry. I'm happy to be here. I will make one correction. So it was really the team transformed themselves with the DORA metrics. I just kind of helped them do that. Let's just put it that way. But about myself, I started my career back in 2004 as a front-end Java developer. Web apps were a lot different. They were harder to make back then. And I wanted something easier to work with. So around 2006, I started looking at the tech landscape and decided to invest time in a new framework called Ruby on Rails. And I ended up making a career out of that move and still work with Rails today. In 2016, I joined a tiny startup named Airspace as a full stack senior software engineer. Airspace was looking to transform time-critical logistics by building a platform that enables the fastest, safest, and most transparent shipments in the industry. I'm happy to say we were successful with that mission, and Airspace has grown considerably because of it. My responsibilities have changed over the past 8 years, and for the past 6 years, I've been focused on team building and management. As a tech-enabled, time-critical logistics business, Airspace moves like highly valuable, one-of-a-kind items. For example, we work with organ procurement organizations to move donated organs to their donor matches. We also move blood and tissue samples, industry-unique prototypes, even huge jet airplane engines. So all kinds of different stuff. Because that's the nature of our business, we cannot have a platform that fails. So balancing that requirement with the need to ship high-quality software frequently is the biggest challenge that our delivery pipeline is ultimately tuned for.
So Chris, big fan of Ruby on Rails framework. When I was doing my PhD at Berkeley, I was doing TA for my advisor, Professor Armando Fox. We teach the software engineering course at Berkeley, and then we use Ruby on Rails. Nice. And then all the students loved it, this language. It's very poetry-like. So yeah, good to see that that's
language.
Your first framework.
Yeah, nice.
Cool. So I want to dig deeper into your journey of leveraging DORA metrics. And so so your team at Airspace, collectively saw significant improvements after leveraging DORA metrics. So what motivated you to start this transformational journey? Can you walk us through the specific steps and strategies implemented that led to these improvements?
Yeah, sure. So, as a startup, we had some significant growth after a few years. So mainly, and one of those growth spurts was in 2021. So our team grew significantly, and then after that team growth, we started to see that like our Rails monolith pipeline, which is kind of the heart of our platform, started to slow down considerably. Developer changes would sit for weeks waiting for QA to look at them. Sometimes those changes would take over a month to get to production. As you would imagine, no one was happy with this, not the stakeholders, not the devs themselves. So we really need to rethink like how our team operates. Prior to this problem, like I had read the book Accelerate and was really impressed with that and kind of filed it away in my brain as like a blueprint for team transformation. So when the time came for our team to change, to me, the answer was clear. It was like, just follow what's in the book Accelerate. easier. It sounds easier than it actually is. But once I kind of got my team on board with the idea, and we identified what we would need to do to like ship faster safely, and we kind of identified 5 main high-level goals that we needed to accomplish in order to get our DORA metrics in the right place. So one was to kind of remove the wall between developers and QA by making all engineers responsible for quality. So at the time, we kind of had like a traditional pipeline. We had the developers that would build the features, and then when they would do their own bit of manual testing. But once those features were ready, they really kind of push it over to the QA team. The QA team was like writing the different test cases, the test automation, etc. So as you had, and this is common, right? You have the developers, they throw their changes over to the QA team does their magic testing them, and then they come back and say, no, this doesn't work. They throw it back to the developers. And that can create kind of a vicious, sometimes contentious cycle. So we wanted to break that wall down and make all developers, all engineers on our team responsible for quality and really kind of embrace that. And that goes for like test planning. So planning the tests for the feature, but also test maintenance. I mean, because we use Ruby on Rails in our main monolith, a dynamic language like that puts a heavy, and Rails in particular, puts a heavy emphasis on testing. So we have tons of tests, unit tests and end-to-end tests, integration, everything in between, right? And us, like a lot of other teams, really suffered from flaky tests. And that really slowed down our pipeline. It was a constant battle that nobody likes to fight, right? And you really need it. We really want a good process around managing those tests in particular. The other thing that we did was we wanted to enable all developers to deploy small changes quickly and without notice. Like deploy should just be going out. It shouldn't be a big deal. It shouldn't be a song and dance. There doesn't need to be an announcement. I mean, you want to be able to monitor that stuff and should be available to everyone, but it doesn't need to be a big ceremony. Prior to that goal, our QA team owned the deploys. So not only were they testing everything, but they were also stitching together what a deploy would look like. And we had a pretty good deploy frequency, actually. We were deploying it like once a week, sometimes 2 times a week, which is not bad. But we wanted to be able to do it every day on demand. But we had to do that safely because you can't disrupt the platform, right? So that was the challenge. Next high-level goal is we wanted to carve up the platform into areas of ownership so that everyone knew who was responsible for what. And that plays to the stability side of the DORA, right? Like that enables your team to kind of react quickly to any bugs that come up or any, flaky tests that need to be handled. If everyone knows who owns what, then it's very clear where tickets should go or who to talk to about a problem that's coming up. And it was important to define that. Fourth requirement, we need to automate everything we could around deploys and test management. Anything that was manual, we were skeptical about. Like we wanted to really take the time to see, can we build something or leverage something that's going to automate this for us so that it's predictable, safe, and done by machines and not humans. And then lastly, I'd say we wanted to introduce playbooks to kind of quickly and methodically handle bad deploys, because those are going to happen. And if you're deploying frequently, you need to be able to handle the bumps in the roads that come along. So those were kind of the 5 things that we identified that we needed to do in order to move DORA metrics in the right direction, right? Those are not DORA related. Those are specific to our team. They're not DORA metrics in and of themselves, but they will move the DORA metrics in the right direction if we did them right. So we needed to first, we identified what we wanted to do. We had ideas about how we could do it, but before we really dug into that, we had to figure out how are we going to track this. DORA metrics are our guiding light. What do they mean for our team? We needed to define that, and then we need to figure out how to track that. So we took that time to find what the DORA metrics meant for our team, figured out, what kind of data could we get from GitHub, from Jira, et cetera, to kind of stitch together to give us insight into, first a baseline on our DORA metrics, and then ultimately changes that we make in our process, in our pipeline, are they having the positive impact that we're looking for? At first, like when we were going through this kind of whole transformation period, and it took over a year, or about a year, a little over a year. And we were doing all that manually. So like me and and our other directors would track these things, and then we would meet with the team every week. We would get together and have a meeting and kind of like review progress, talk about the problems that are facing the team and what changes we need to make to ultimately move those DORA metrics kind of in the right direction. Now, I would say like all that was very data driven, right? Like that's like developer activity, how we're moving tickets, stuff like that. But the other thing that we did that I thought was really interesting was quarterly, we did a DORA quick check with the team. So, 5 simple questions. At the time it was 5. We'd send that out to the team. Everyone would respond. And that's much more qualitative, right? You're just talking about, what's your gut feeling about how well this pipeline is working. And that was important to do. And it was remarkable to see that as our pipeline improved and we could see it in the data of the metrics we were tracking, the confidence and like the positive feelings around the pipeline from the developers themselves tracked really tight. Like there was a tight correlation between those two things. And we were able to see that throughout the course of our transformation, which I think really made it successful and gave us a lot of confidence in saying, we really turned this around and things are better now. Always room for improvement, but things are better, much better than where we were when we started the journey.
This is amazing. Do you remember the NPS score from your survey from when the transformation started to when it's more mature?
Oh, I would have to look it up. I do have it. It's in a spreadsheet, and you could like kind of see the curve, but I don't have that data with me right now.
No worries.
I could dig it up for you though.
So Chris, follow on question for me. So going back to kind of the business requirements for you guys, obviously you guys are in a pretty unique space, time critical logistics. You mentioned, hey, a lot of times you're shipping organs, right? Or blood or other samples. So obviously time critical and, lives are depending on this. So you mentioned
Very
that
much, yes.
those requirements are driving obviously high availability, right? The platform cannot go down. So that kind of speaks more to the stability aspects of DORA. But help me, how does that relate to also velocity, right? What part about the, shipping organs, health critical, lives depending on it type of stuff, how does that translate into you guys? It's important for you guys to go faster, going from one deploy a week or 2 a week to like multiple a day. How do those tie together in your business?
So in our space, logistics runs everything, right? It's an old industry. It's very much stuck in its ways in a lot of ways. And the founders of aerospace, they really wanted to disrupt that and use technology to do it. So we're in our space, which is, time critical is a small space of logistics, right? Big in terms of like a market, but it's ultimately small in terms of all logistics. And we were able to kind of come in, successfully use a platform to disrupt the industry. And when that happens, then all, customers who had been with the industry incumbents for a long time start switching to you, and they're like very enthusiastic about your platform. They have lots of ideas. They want lots of different things. They're telling us all of their problems, and we're, our product team is spending a lot of time with them to understand like what solutions we could build to make their lives better. So there's just a lot of new requirements and features coming our way, and we're kind of at the forefront of figuring out how that should work in time critical logistics. No one had really been doing this in our space, and so people were very enthusiastic and kept giving us lots of ideas and telling us lots of problems, and we were like, we can solve that, and we want to do it, and we want to do it fast. So I'd say that's how velocity comes into play in the industry.
There's always so many feature requests from customers, right?
You bet. Yes, absolutely.
Chris, there's so much gold in the 5 points you mentioned that help you guys do the transformation of DORA metrics. I want to first expand on the first point, which is the testing, the role of testing in this. So can you tell us more? So testing is this really a recurring challenge that we hear from all those engineering leaders. Everyone knows the benefits of having a great test suite, but they are hard to write, and then sometimes they're flaky. They're hard to maintain, and to get really high reliability. So how were you guys be able to shift left on testing and be able to produce those high quality tests and avoid the flaky test situation?
So all of our engineers were skilled in writing tests. So that was done, but the work was kind of split between developers who were more focused on the unit and integration tests that they write when they're producing their code, right? Because you want that type feedback loop between, did this change that I've just made, is it really doing what I wanted to? Our QA team was very concerned with overall platform coverage and the end-to-end tests that you want to basically, automate the user's journey through parts of your platform. So we had different engineers focused on different types of tests. And what we really wanted was all engineers used to all kinds of tests. What we had to do was kind of make sure our QA team, when we wanted to enable our developers to really own the quality aspect of their changes, that meant that they were responsible for all types of tests around those features. They need to drive like ownership of those tests. So like when something fails, it should be the team lead that addresses it, not the QA team. They also wanted the developers to kind of own the process of identifying the test cases. So when you look at that, you're kind of like, well, then what do you do with your QA team? What's their role? Because they're usually responsible for all that. What we ended up doing was kind of shifting their overall role from being QA engineers who are just like doing tests, like writing test cases and running tests, to being engineering productivity engineers. So they are in charge of the overall health of the test suite, and they can be leveraged by other teams to get help on test cases. So a team that might be like, hey, we got this big feature coming through. What's the test strategy look for it that's going to make sense? Developers are skilled in that, they're confident in that, but they could leverage the expertise of QA engineers who are focused on quality to come up with those plans. And those plans would be implemented by the developers and then used really by the QA team. So now as an engineering productivity team, they're an enablement team. So their goal kind of shifts to, how can I support these teams in their quality control work? And also, what kind of tooling can we introduce to the teams to help them maintain better quality? So their role shifted from doing the tests and writing the tests and doing everything tests to enabling the other engineers on the teams to do that work, own the test, write the test, have reliable tests, etc.
This is super interesting. So it sounds like one of the keys to increase the developer ownership in testing processes more on the execution side of things. And that allows the original QA team to work more on the foundation and the infrastructure to support all the teams being able to do testing more effectively.
Yeah, they become much more of a supporting team, an enabling team. But they do also own the overall health of the test. So coming up with processes to, identify the flakes or be really on top of like the flaky tests, like which ones are killing our builds. Let's have a process around like quickly pulling them out, right? So that we can so the builds pass more reliably and get through quicker. But what do you do with those tests? Like that's what engineering productivity has a lot more focus on, is those types of processes, test suites, health, tooling, again, all in support of developers being able to own the tests around their features.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a bit more about how did you manage this cultural shift or transition within your team? Like, were there some hurdles that you had to overcome to make this happen?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the biggest hurdle is you have this team of QA engineers that were, hired with the role of doing tests, right? Building tests, like automating tests, doing manual tests. And now you're telling them, well, we want other people to do that. So what are they going to do? So working with those engineers who are going through a lot of change in their career at their employer, which is a scary thing. But working closely with them to identify, what does engineering productivity mean for our team? What are they excited about? What do they want to do? What do they want to focus on? And getting them excited about that role change and to really embrace it, that was one challenge. On the other side, you had the developers. Now, developers, they kind of probably feel like, hey, I was hired to write code and deliver features. I've been doing that, but now you're telling me I have to own my deploys, I have to own my tests, I have to maintain quality, I have to do all the post-deploy monitoring. No one told me that when I was hired, but I have to do all that too. Um, Working with the developers to understand, how can they do that? How does it fit into their development cycle, and how it's a positive add-on for them and at Airspace, but long-term in their career, and getting them excited about that so that they want to take on those new skills and they want to be experts in those new areas for the good of their role at Airspace and beyond. Those are the biggest challenges for sure.
And Chris, would you say that, so this cultural shift that you guys went through, moving left, where having your developers take more of an ownership in the quality and the test, did that result because now you're gathering the DORA metrics that give you the insights? For instance, you got the DORA metrics, now you can see where you stand from stability and velocity. Now, because of that, now you need to go faster. Okay, so how do I go faster? Well, again, the metrics are telling me only a small number of my developers are doing tests. So that's where I need to focus in on. Did the results kind of come across because you got insights from the DORA metrics?
I would say the DORA metrics gave us proof of what we kind of thought we already knew.
Got it.
So they were kind of like and because of that, we were like, okay, this can be a guiding light, right? If we pay attention to our lead time for changes, like we can be pretty, and they're moving in the right direction, and that lead time is shrinking, we can be pretty confident that that's an area, that's something that we need to be focusing on. So I wouldn't say that we wouldn't look at the metrics and be like, oh, now we have to do this. It was more like, we think we have to do all these things, but we want to be sure that those are the right things. So let's track these DORA metrics and see if they kind of, support our hypothesis.
Yeah.
More or less.
And it's funny that you say that, because we've talked about that before, with other guests and with other developers and engineering leaders, and you see this kind of across industries too. Whereas prior, there's more of a focus on, without the data, there's more of a focus on emotional or kind of gut feeling or kind of gut reactions, which if you're basing all your decisions on that, obviously that's bad. But now there's been a focus on metrics and data-driven approaches. But many organizations have kind of over-rotated to now it's too much on the metrics, or you're managing to the metrics. So an over-rotation, which is also kind of not ideal. But I think what you're pointing to is kind of the ideal, where it's a mix of both. It's, you have a gut feeling and a sense of what the problem is. Now let's gather the metrics, and now both those things align. So you have two points that are pointing in the same direction. Now you can make a informed decision, right? So that's kind of
absolutely. You want to pay attention to the data, but you also have to pay attention to like developer happiness, right? because you can make all these changes on your team, but if nobody's happy, that's
What's the point?
terrible.
Yeah.
No one wants to work there, and then you're just not going to have a pipeline. So DORA was nice in that respect, right? And the quick check, I would say it really gave us just a fast place to start. It was like, okay, Accelerate gives us the answers, but we need to figure out what DORA metrics mean for our team. But we're kind of in a crisis and we want to get started on this. Like right now, the simplest thing we can do is survey our team and just see how are people feeling about this pipeline, right? And then, people engaged in that, and we saw the results, and we were kind of like, oh yeah, people don't feel too good about this. All right, now we're figuring out how to get the data for actually tracking DORA metrics, but let's keep checking in with the team and see how they actually feel about it. And it was important. And like I said, it was very illuminating to see how improvement in the DORA metrics led to more confidence and positive feelings about pipeline and software development and airspace in general overall.
Yeah, I strongly resonate, with the point on focus on developer satisfaction and happiness. From one of our previous episode guests, I think one of the definition for engineering leader is really, as a service provider, right? It's a service to developers. It's how to provide care service, how to ensure the health of the team. I think that's one of the critical functions for all of the engineering leaders. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the role of any leader, I would say.
Any leader.
Yeah.
Great point. So I'm curious, in the early days of bumping up your deployment frequency, did you encounter any increase in incidents or challenges? How did you address these issues to maintain stability and reliability?
So we were pretty lucky in that we didn't see any sort of increase in, bad deploys. I would say the biggest challenge was, well, for one, you have to think through how are you going to enable seamless deployment by anybody with little fanfare, but with visibility. And the way that we did that was we ended up building, and again, we focused on automating. So we ended up building basically a deployment coordinator that helped automate the, a merge to main to running the key tests that we think are necessary before deployment. Not all tests. You already have to have a green build with all tests before you merge to main, right? Once you've passed that hurdle, which is a lot of tests, it's time consuming, it's expensive. Merge to main, run a battery of select tests, coordinate all the different merges to main that could be happening at the same time, and then get them deployed out. So we built an orchestrator to do that. And any problems that we saw were probably with that orchestrator. Just, once we started using it for real, it had some hiccups, right? And we had to iron those out. But I do not recall the orchestrator or anything creating a bunch of bad deploys where we had to do, rollbacks or anything like that. It may have happened, but nothing too scary. We were lucky in that respect. But it wasn't just luck. I mean, it's also, again, our emphasis on making sure that we don't have bad deploys as much as possible. And then add on to that the DORA emphasis of you can have bad deploy, just know how to get out of it quickly. Kind of helped us maintain a pretty successful rollout of that tool.
Cool. So help me understand the responsibility of that deployment orchestrator. So it's responsible for spinning up production-like environments when the code is complete, and then does it also help with the testing? And then when it's done, then it actually merges to main and then actually push to production. Does that cover everything that I've described here?
So this tool actually kicks in after the merge to main. A lot of the work, almost most of the testing happens prior to that point. And this was part of the shift left stuff too. We built an environment, it's a pretty sophisticated environment, where developers can spin up instances in the cloud, very production-like environment, test all their changes there, our CI environment very similarly uses like a production-like environment. It's in charge of running all of our tests, which is a large test suite. We parallelize the heck out of it. And if you get a green, and we have good coverage, like a high degree of coverage. So if you are able to test manually your changes in a production-like environment in the cloud, and you get a green build, you have a pretty high, and you get sign-off from the product team and the rest of your team. At that point, you have a pretty high degree of confidence in your changes. Merge it to main. Once you merge it to main, that thing's going out the door in a few minutes. And this orchestrator is what's in charge of that. Its main job is to handle different merges to main, right? Because if you merge to main and I merge to main at about the same time, we don't want both sets of changes going out at the same time. We need to be able to say, okay, this set of changes came first, it's going to go out, but now all the other ones, they need to update, right? They need to update, and then they need to go out. So it's in charge of like kind of orchestrating that aspect, and then also running that light battery of tests, which are more like performance tests, maybe some quick authentication tests, smoke tests, just to make sure everything's like looking good, like right before the actual deploy. So the tool is kind of lightweight in terms of like responsibilities, but it's crucial for automating all those steps so that developers just know, okay, once I merge to main, this thing's going out. I'm just going to monitor my changes like in Datadog, and I'm going to monitor, the actual deployment, which is posted into a Slack channel.
Awesome. So the orchestration system is tackling that deployment contention situation. So
yeah.
Okay, got it.
I'll say that's its main role. And then we use some other tools in addition to ours in order to kind of, keep pull requests up to date and know that keep them green. Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about the post-deployment monitoring process for developers? And how did you, set this up for developers? And how was there any training process involved to get developers comfortable with this kind of process?
So this is an area of constant. I mean, these are all areas of constant improvement, but this is one. This is a tricky one. We use Datadog, great tool, complex tool, tough to get a handle on. So yeah, part of, if you're going to be deploying very quickly and anybody can deploy, we had to push, again, this is kind of like in the realm of ownership. It's like you have to own your change, like from the minute the product team gives you the requirements to the moment that thing has been deployed to production and after. So you better instrument your changes appropriately so that they are reporting to Datadog to a dashboard or with like tags or what have you, that you know what to look at when your change goes out, right? And if you do that, then you can have a high degree of confidence that your change is operating as expected, or you'll see that it's starting to not work as you intend before it causes problems for your users. So there's a heavy emphasis on that, but that is not an easy thing to get people to do and be skilled at. I will say that.
Makes sense. So I want to take a different direction here and talk about the hype right now in the technology industry, which is AI tooling in software engineering. So I'm curious, how is your team leveraging AI tools in your software engineering processes? Are there AI tooling that you're currently using, and what results have you seen from their application?
Yeah, so we are definitely leveraging AI tooling. We've had an AI team at Airspace for many years. So we've been using AI in our platform well before ChatGPT came out. So we're very open to it, and we're very, very excited about it and have been using that stuff. So most of the developers are using Copilot. We have GitHub Copilot licenses for everybody. And then we have other engineers who are experimenting with a lot of the different LLMs and, stitching them together to do some pretty incredible stuff. I've seen for myself and other developers on the team, like a significant boost in productivity just by using those tools. I would say the real benefit comes from, like a tool like Copilot. It's like having a pair with you all the time where you don't have to worry about bugging them. You don't have to worry about feeling dumb. You can just ask it whatever you want about anything that you need, and it's going to give you an answer that may not be totally accurate, but is probably going to be good enough that it's going to give you a big leg up rather than Googling around for the answer.
Yeah.
So I hope my team is leveraging that as much as I think they are. I see for myself that it's a big boom. And I know I've seen some tools that people on my team have stitched together that have been pretty impressive in terms of automating a lot of the development cycle. And I think our engineers will continue to do that and probably continue to leverage AI very often and early. And yeah, I feel like the team is going to be augmented by AI bots significantly in the not too distant future. Let's put it that way.
So,
Yeah.
Chris, along those lines, right? I wanted to go back to something kind of your original story of transformation, right? You were able to collect the DORA metrics. So a lot of times people will ask for DORA metrics or metrics in general, and now you get the metrics, and then it's okay. Well, so what? Like, where do we go from here? How do we take these numbers, these metrics, and actually affect change and affect improvement in the engineering teams or in the organization, right? You guys were able to do a good job of that. You had an hypothesis, and then you gathered the DORA metrics. The metrics confirmed the hypothesis, but then you achieved what everyone sets out to achieve. You actually use that knowledge in order to affect change in the organization and actually improve. And it seems like what you guys did was almost like the opposite of AI. It was a lot of people and a lot of process, right? It was like those standard meetings or the weekly meetings with their developers, and those kind of petered out over time as the changes took effect. But a lot of it was more people and process oriented, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't think you can leverage AI to like improve your DORA metrics too well. Yeah.
But how were you able to, how are you able to drive that kind of change? Did the developers think there was a lot of added bureaucracy, or how did you kind of get them to buy in to that?
I mean, that's the challenge of your directors, your managers, etc., right? You need to know your team. You need to know what do they like, what gets them excited. How do you make sure that this change isn't scary for them? This is all people stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the crucial thing. You got to get people excited, bought into the idea. There needs to be something in it for them. Like it needs to improve their career. You need to tell them how it's going to improve their career. So that, if you go on this journey with me, you're going to be a better developer at Airspace. You're just going to be a better software developer overall. Because, as much as I'd love to keep everybody on the team and we have a very low turnover, people are going to move on. That's just the fact of life. So the best thing I can do as a manager is set them up for success in their next role and get people bought into that idea and excited about these changes and get them to trust that, you have something that is worth trying. You might not have all the answers and you don't exactly know how to do it. So when things don't work out well, we're going to talk about it. We're going to figure out how can we pivot and change quickly to try something else.
Yeah.
Until we're happy.
It goes back to what you said before. It goes back to leadership, right? Good leadership. We spend a lot of time talking about technology and metrics and AI, and all of those things are going to be important, but those are all tools that in order to really use those things to drive improvement, it goes back to principles that we've all been working on for many, many years. It's people trusting each other, people wanting to work with each other, and leaders that enable that and bring people on the journey. It's going to get more important.
Yeah. And like DORA metrics, they're a tool and you have to look at them that way. You might know nothing. You might think your team is working great and you're just, this DORA is interesting. So let me start tracking the the metrics. Let me get DevLake and I'll start checking these metrics. Now you're looking at a dashboard, you see all your DORA metrics. But what does that tell you about your team? It just gives you a little bit of insight onto how things are flowing. But it's up to you to know your team well enough and the pipeline and how it's operating to say, oh, here are the bottlenecks. Maybe if we change this part of the pipeline, maybe if we start testing, maybe if we start writing our tests earlier, then we'll have less time writing tests at the end after the feature's been done. Maybe that will move things a little bit faster. Maybe not. Try it out. See. Well, now you're checking DORA metrics. You should see some movement in that metric, up or down, right? Don't change too much stuff at once, right? Because you need to know like what's actually having the effect. But yeah, it's kind of like get your metric, get a baseline, think about your team, how it operates, where you think the bottlenecks are, and what do you think you can do to solve one bottleneck. Make that change, try it out, see what your metrics do, right? Okay, that worked, that did something positive, let's keep it. All right, where's the next one? There's the next bottleneck. Okay, what are we doing there? Just repeat that until you get to a place where you're happier. Never be perfect, but you'll be happier, hopefully.
Love
Team
it.
will be happier.
Yeah, so like know your team, get your developers excited about this journey, make some changes, see the changes in metrics, and then keep experimenting. So, wow,
Yep.
I think this is a perfect place to wrap up our discussion. But we do have, before we wrap up this episode, we do have 3 rapid fire questions for you, Chris, whenever you're ready.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so what's your favorite development tool that you cannot live without?
Lots of tools I use every day, but the one mainstay through my career that I just cannot imagine my career without is the command line. So Z shell these days, bash in the past. I mean, I just can't think of doing what I do without that. And I've been working with Linux for a very long time, so it's just in me.
A quick
Z
follow-up,
shell.
is there any particular Z shell client that you're using?
I just use all my Z shells.
My Z
It's
shell.
a really old project that I just load up, and that's what I do to get things done.
Cool. Next one, can you recommend a recent book or blog that you came across and found great?
So I have to admit, I have not read a lot of tech books lately, and there's no specific blog. I read all kinds of blogs, but there's no ones that I like really follow. But a couple books came to mind that really impacted my career. One is Accelerate, obviously, and anyone if you're interested in DORA and you think you might be applying it to your team or your team is using it, read that book. It's very clear, it's short, and you'll just leave it as like, oh, this is a no-brainer. We should just do this. Another one is Michael Feathers, Working Effectively with Legacy Code. I mean, for anybody who's going onto a team where there's an existing project, which is the vast majority of jobs, that book really helps you kind of learn how to get comfortable in a new code base, like quickly and safely, and know how to operate even in the biggest, hairiest thing. Well, that book really impressed me. And then lastly, I'm going to throw in there like the book called the Unix Philosophy, or books like it, because I think like the principles, the ideas that came out of the very early days of computing, especially around Unix, are very much at the core of a lot of the tech that we're still using today, but sometimes that's lost. And reading a short little book like the Unix Philosophy can be really illuminating in like why things operate in high tech the way that they do.
Fantastic.
Any non-technical books, Chris? You reading anything now that's interesting? It's non-technical.
I assume most of the non-tech books I'm reading these days are around parenting. So they're very insightful and helpful, but I wouldn't say that.
Oh, I gotta catch up with you later. Then I need to pick a couple of those up myself. Then.
So yeah.
Last one. If you could only code in one language for the rest of your life, which one would it be? I know this is a hard one.
This is a really tough one. I mean, I've had love affairs with Ruby for years. JavaScript, I've been into that. Recently, I've been working with Dart, Flutter. Like, that's been really fun. But if it was like one thing for the rest of my career, I would probably go back to like the very beginning of my career, which was working with C as a web developer. C is just a very small, pretty little language, but with like lots of hairy and scary parts that can take like years to master. These days, it's not nearly as prevalent as it was, except at the very lowest levels, but it's fun. And like, spending the time at those low level languages can really help you understand what's happening in the higher level languages and why a lot of the safety that's built into the higher level languages these days, why you would want them. You will learn pretty quickly if you're spending a lot of time in something like C.
Awesome. So you're one of those old school guys.
I'm an old school guy by today's standards, I guess. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for all the insights. It's great to have you on the show.
Likewise. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Anmol. I appreciate it.